The bulldozer blade was folding my tomato beds into the dirt when HOA President Diane Keller pointed at the peach trees and told the operator, "Clear everything to the fence." Wet soil rolled over broken irrigation pipe, and parking space paint cans sat beside crushed cedar boards. I did not step in front of the machine. I raised my phone, photographed the work order, and asked the operator which boundary map he had been given. Diane smiled as if the question proved I was stalling. "The association leased this entire strip years ago. You've been gardening on our overflow lot." The operator climbed down and handed me his site sheet. Its printed parcel line stopped at the drainage swale. Diane's orange flags continued 70 feet beyond it, straight through my garden. When I pointed that out, he shut off the engine and called his supervisor. Diane's smile disappeared, but only for a moment. She pulled a letter from a red folder and held it against the operator's window. The top carried the Stonebridge Commons logo. The bottom carried her signature beneath a paragraph promising that the association would accept responsibility for the work. The supervisor arrived in a white pickup, read the letter twice, and told his crew to continue while he contacted his office. "My name is Nora Whitaker. I was 52 that spring, and I had spent 6 growing seasons turning that patch into a working market garden. I knew every low place where rain collected and every valve hidden beneath the mulch. Watching the blade lift my cedar beds felt strangely intimate, like seeing someone empty the drawers in my bedroom. But anger would not put the soil back. Evidence might stop them from taking the rest. I photographed the company name on the bulldozer, the license plates, the orange flags, and the measuring marks painted across the grass. I recorded the time each truck entered. When an irrigation coupling surfaced in the dirt, I placed a ruler beside it and took another picture before the blade buried it again. One worker quietly told me his crew had received the boundary plan that morning. He let me photograph the number printed in its lower corner, P17A. By sunset, gray gravel covered most of the damaged ground. 14 raised beds were gone, the irrigation manifold had been crushed, and the surviving peach trees stood only a few yards from the final orange flag. Diane watched the last truck spread its load, then warned me not to interfere with association property again. After the crew left, I walked the new gravel edge with my closing folder under one arm. The gravel still held the day's heat, and crushed tomato vines protruded along its edge, green leaves already gray with dust. My deed described the full 1.74 acres. My title policy referenced an old parking lease near the clubhouse. Neither document mentioned P17A. The photographed work order carried no surveyor's seal, no county recording number, and no authorization from me. Then I enlarged the image on my phone. Beneath the unfamiliar map number was a faint line of text, revised from lease exhibit. If P17A had truly come from that lease, there had to be an earlier map somewhere, and someone had decided I was never supposed to see it. I barely slept that night. Every time a truck shifted gears on the county road, I pictured another load of gravel crossing my garden. At 5 the next morning, I made coffee and spread my property records across the kitchen table. Dirt still lined the creases of my hands. I had washed them twice, but the smell of crushed tomato vines remained under my nails. I bought the Whitaker place in 2018, although everyone nearby still called it the Bell property after the family that had farmed it for 3 generations. The house sat on 1.74 acres at the western edge of Stonebridge Commons. My deed did not place the land inside the association, and I paid no HOA dues. The clubhouse, pool, and original parking lot lay east of a shallow drainage swale that curved behind my peach trees. The garden occupied 0.46 acres on my side of that swale. It was small by farm standards, but it was not a hobby. 2 restaurants bought herbs and heirloom tomatoes from me each week. On Fridays, I delivered whatever remained to a community food pantry. The income paid the property taxes and most of my winter heating bill. More important, the work had given shape to my life after I left a 27-year career managing hospital kitchens. I liked knowing that a seed tray, a weather forecast, and a few months of patience could become something useful. I had known about an old parking lease when I purchased the property. My title policy referenced a 1998 agreement between the Bell family and the developer of Stonebridge Commons. The lease allowed a narrow piece of land near the clubhouse to be used for 18 parking spaces. Those spaces already existed on a gravel strip east of the swale. During my 6 years there, the HOA had resurfaced that strip twice, but no worker had crossed into the garden. The lease was supposed to expire in 2023. At 9 that morning, Diane returned in a silver SUV and taped a red-bordered notice to my fence. It accused me of unauthorized cultivation on association-controlled land and ordered me to remove the surviving peach trees within 10 days. She did not knock. She photographed the notice, looked toward my kitchen window, and drove away. The demand transformed yesterday's destruction into something larger. Diane was not claiming that the crew had made a measurement error. She was claiming the HOA controlled the entire strip and that my trees were the next obstruction. I scanned the notice and sent it, along with my photographs, to Rachel Monroe, a property attorney recommended by my title agent. Rachel called before noon. She warned me not to remove anything, threaten anyone, or treat the title policy as a complete answer. My deed established what I owned, she explained, but a lease could grant someone else limited use for a fixed time. We needed the signed lease, its exact map, and any valid renewal. The digital closing file on my computer contained my deed, title policy, tax documents, and a recorded memorandum of lease. The memorandum identified the original parties and referred to Exhibit B, leased premises, but Exhibit B was not attached. I searched the county's online index using the recording number. The same 4-page memorandum appeared, still without the map. That afternoon, I walked the drainage swale with my phone and a measuring tape. Beneath weeds near its northern bend, I found the rusted top of an iron pin. 12 feet away, a weathered cedar marker remained from the Bell family's garden fence. Both stood near the printed boundary line I had seen on the contractor's plan, not Diane's orange flags. Rachel contacted the title company while I called its old local office. The branch had closed during a merger, and the first employee I reached found only the same incomplete scan. Then an older records clerk named Susan Bell returned my message. She was not related to the former owners, but she remembered the office's unfinished digitization project. Some of those closing files were retained on paper, she said. If yours survived, the missing exhibit may still be folded inside it. Susan agreed to search an off-site storage room the following morning. After we hung up, I looked through the window at the gray gravel where my green rose had been. For the first time since the bulldozer arrived, I had a place to look that Diane did not control and could not easily erase. Susan called at 10:17 the next morning. I remember the time because I had been staring at my phone since sunrise, answering restaurant messages about orders I could no longer fill. I found a Whitaker closing carton, she said. There's a paper lease inside, and something is folded behind it. Rachel drove me to the title company's regional office that afternoon. Susan met us in a windowless records room wearing cotton gloves and carrying a gray archival box. She photographed the seal before opening it, then logged each document she removed. Rachel explained that the careful routine mattered. A useful map had to be more than old paper. We needed to show where it came from and how it connected to the recorded lease. The original agreement was dated June 12, 1998. Behind its signature page, folded into quarters, was Exhibit B. The ink had faded to brown along the creases, but the title remained legible: Leased Premises, Clubhouse Parking. A shaded .29-acre strip contained 18 numbered spaces east of the drainage swale. The western side was unshaded. Across it, in block letters, appeared the sentence I had spent 2 days hoping existed: Owner's garden parcel, excluded from leased premises. I touched the plastic sleeve Susan had placed over the page, but not the paper itself. The map did not restore a single plant. Still, seeing those words felt like taking a full breath after holding it too long. Rachel compared the exhibit number, lease date, and legal description reference with the recorded memorandum. Each matched. The lease granted a 25-year term ending September 30th, 2023. Renewal required another written agreement signed by both the tenant and the landowner. Susan searched the title company's index, while Rachel checked the county records again. Neither search produced a renewal, amendment, or new lease. We left the original in Susan's custody and obtained a certified copy. The next morning, licensed surveyor Eli Navarro met me beside the drainage swale. He was 44, deliberate in his movements, and unwilling to call any line final until he had compared the deed, monuments, and recorded documents. He located the rusted iron pin I had found, then uncovered a second monument near the southern end of the clubhouse lot. Their positions matched the calls in my deed and the bearings shown on Exhibit B. Eli returned 2 days later with field measurements. Diane's flags crossed an average of 70 feet west of the leased strip and enclosed .32 acres of my garden. The surviving peach trees stood 6 feet inside my property, not on the lease boundary. He marked the verified line with capped stakes and prepared a certified survey showing the deed parcel, the former leased area, the drainage swale, and the new gravel. While Eli worked, 2 residents from Stonebridge Commons stopped beside the parking strip. One of them, a teacher named June Patel, remembered the Bell family tending vegetables west of the swale when the clubhouse first opened. She had never seen cars parked there. June did not offer to take sides, and I did not ask her to. She simply pointed toward the peach trees and said the garden had always begun where the gravel ended. Eli wrote down her contact information, but reminded me that memory could support the records, not replace them. Then we compared the documents on my kitchen table. Exhibit B and P17A used the same clubhouse footprint, access drive, and curved swale. But on P17A, the shaded area had been stretched west to my fence. The 18 numbered spaces were gone. So was the exclusion note. The lower corner still said, "Revised from lease exhibit," yet there was no surveyor's name, scale certification, or revision history. Rachel stopped me when I called it a forgery. She said the differences were serious, but we did not yet know who made the overlay, why it was changed, or whether Diane understood the original limits. Precision would help us more than accusation. That afternoon, Rachel sent the HOA and its contractor a cease and desist demand. It included the certified lease map, Eli's preliminary findings, photographs of the damage, and a preservation notice covering emails, board minutes, project files, invoices, and every version of P17A. She demanded that no vehicle enter the disputed parcel and that the HOA propose a plan for removing the gravel. Diane answered through the HOA's management company the following morning. Her letter did not dispute the lease expiration date or explain the altered shading. Instead, it claimed that decades of parking and maintenance had created continuing rights over the entire area, regardless of what Exhibit B showed. Attached to the response was the contractor's first invoice. One line billed the HOA for boundary layout supplied by client. Beside it, under project contact, was Diane Keller's name. Diane's name on the invoice did not make the case simple. It proved she had supplied something called a boundary layout, not that she had created it or understood it was wrong. Rachel told me to keep collecting facts and let the HOA commit its position in writing. It did so faster than either of us expected. 2 days after receiving the cease and desist letter, Stonebridge Commons emailed its residents that the new overflow lot would open for the Summer Lantern Festival in 3 weeks. The message described the project as an improvement to existing association property and blamed an adjacent owner's unsupported objections for possible delays. My name was not used, but everyone could see which property touched the gravel. By evening, 3 red notices had been stapled to my fence. They warned against blocking association access and threatened recovery of towing, contractor, and legal costs. I photographed each notice before removing it. One had been fastened through a small brass plaque displaying my street number. Not every resident accepted Diane's version. June left a bag on my porch with a note saying she was sorry. A neighbor slowed his truck beside me, started to speak, then glanced toward the clubhouse and drove on. Their reactions showed how institutional pressure worked. It did not require everyone to believe Diane. It only required most people to stay quiet while she acted publicly. The pressure reached beyond paperwork. A restaurant canceled its standing tomato order because I could not promise delivery. At the food pantry, I stood beside 2 half-empty crates while the coordinator quietly rearranged the weekly distribution list. She never complained. That made it worse. I had spent years being the dependable person, and now I was explaining why vegetables buried beneath a parking lot would not arrive. Then rain exposed damage the bulldozer had hidden. Water raced across the compacted gravel instead of soaking into the beds. It carried gray sediment toward the surviving herbs and pooled around the northern peach trees. A broken irrigation line surfaced near the swale, pulsing muddy water whenever I opened the remaining system. I shut it down, installed temporary hoses, and recorded the flooded areas from fixed locations each morning. Rachel had me create a loss file. I added canceled orders, seed invoices, photographs from earlier growing seasons, the cost of emergency hoses, and estimates for replacing 14 cedar beds. I did not assign a price to every memory. I documented the things a court or insurer could actually measure. The first break came from Marcus Hale, the contractor supervisor. His company's attorney responded to the preservation notice and provided the original email chain. Marcus had asked Diane for a certified survey before mobilizing. She sent P17A and wrote that the HOA's legal authority had already been confirmed. The attachment contained no survey seal and no reference to Exhibit B. Marcus also preserved the authorization letter Diane had shown at the bulldozer. It directed the contractor to rely on the association-supplied limits and promised indemnification. His daily report noted that work paused when I questioned the western line, then resumed after Diane insisted that the orange flags represented HOA property. At the next board meeting, June Patel and several residents asked to see the lease renewal and survey. Diane allowed no discussion, saying the matter belonged with counsel. But a director named Thomas Reed later sent Rachel the publicly available meeting packet. The board had approved additional clubhouse parking within existing association rights. It had never voted to buy, lease, or seek permission for any part of my garden. The packet contained a budget and concept drawing, but no title report. The festival deadline made waiting dangerous. Rachel filed a civil complaint seeking a declaration of the parties' property rights, damages for trespass, and orders preventing further entry. She attached my deed, the lease memorandum, certified Exhibit B, Eli's survey, photographs, and the contractor's email. Because the HOA planned to open the gravel area within days, she also requested temporary relief, preserving the land while the case proceeded. Diane's attorney argued that the association had used and maintained the general area for decades, and that closing the new lot would inconvenience hundreds of residents. Rachel answered narrowly. The existing 18 spaces east of the swale were not in dispute. The question was whether historical use, or an expired lease, authorized the HOA to occupy 0.32 acres west of it now. At the hearing, the judge did not decide final ownership from the bench. She reviewed the documents, asked whether any signed renewal existed, and questioned why P17A lacked a surveyor's identification. The HOA could not produce a renewal. The judge issued a temporary order prohibiting parking, additional construction, tree removal, or entry beyond the surveyed line until an evidentiary hearing. Orange barriers appeared across the new gravel the following morning. Residents photographed the empty spaces that Diane had promised for the festival. I should have felt relieved, but the garden beneath them was still gone. As we left the courthouse, Diane passed close enough for me to smell her sharp perfume. She looked at Rachel, not me. Once we produce the original lease, she said, this disappears. Rachel waited until Diane entered the elevator. Then she opened her case folder just enough for me to see the certified copy of Exhibit B. Good, she said. Now she has committed to that lease. The temporary order changed the view from my kitchen, but not the ground. Orange barriers kept vehicles off the gravel, while rain continued settling it into soil that had once produced food. The case moved more slowly than weather. Over the next 4 months, Rachel exchanged written questions, document requests, and deposition notices with the HOA's attorneys. Stonebridge Commons claimed that the 1998 lease had been renewed by conduct. Its answer said the association's continued parking and maintenance showed that both sides intended the arrangement to continue after 2023. Rachel pointed out the missing half of that argument. The HOA had continued using the original 18 spaces east of the swale. I had never objected because those spaces were outside my garden. Nothing showed that I permitted parking west of the swale, much less bulldozing there. Discovery arrived in batches. Rachel organized the files by date while I built a spreadsheet showing where each described task occurred. Every gravel delivery before the project went to the original strip. Every landscape invoice treated the swale as the western edge of clubhouse maintenance. Then we found an email dated 8 months before the bulldozer arrived. The HOA's former attorney had written to Diane and the property manager after reviewing the clubhouse renovation plan. He warned that the parking lease had expired, that no automatic renewal appeared in the documents he received, and that any expansion required a title review, survey, and written agreement with the neighboring owner. Diane replied that the old parking area had always belonged with the clubhouse and asked whether the board could proceed while the paperwork was cleaned up later. The attorney answered with one sentence: "Do not expand beyond the existing gravel footprint without confirming ownership and use rights." I read that line 3 times. For months I had tried to leave room for a misunderstanding. Diane might have received an incomplete file. She might have trusted a bad drawing. That email did not prove she intended every consequence, but it showed she had been warned about the exact risk she later dismissed in my garden. The reason for her haste appeared in the renovation records. Stonebridge Commons had converted part of its original lot into an enlarged pool deck and outdoor kitchen, eliminating 12 lawful spaces. The summer festival permit depended on an approved parking plan. Leasing spaces at a nearby church would have delayed the event and added an expense Diane had not included in the project budget. The board presentation that approved the renovation contained a concept graphic. Its blue parking area extended across the swale, but print at the bottom stated, "Concept only, not a boundary survey." 3 weeks later, an editable copy of that graphic was saved as P17A. File metadata identified the HOA Management Office as its creator. An email showed Diane asking the property manager to remove the concept label before sending the plan to Marcus. No message explicitly told anyone to erase the garden exclusion note because the concept graphic had never contained it. P17A was not a modified copy of Exhibit B at all. It was a planning image, labeled as though it had been revised from the lease map. That distinction mattered. It explained how the false boundary appeared without requiring us to invent a secret drafting operation. Depositions weakened the board's united front. Thomas Reed testified that Diane told directors the title question had been resolved. 2 other directors said they never saw the former attorney's warning or Exhibit B before approving the contractor budget. Marcus testified that his crew would have stopped at the swale if the certified lease map or Eli's survey had been provided. Diane maintained that she believed the concept graphic reflected established use. When Rachel showed her the warning email, she said she understood existing gravel footprint to include the planned expansion. She could not explain why she removed the concept disclaimer or why the garden had remained cultivated for decades if the HOA considered it parking property. Meanwhile, agricultural soil specialist Dr. Lena Cho took core samples from the damaged area and an undisturbed section near the peach trees. Her testing documented severe surface compaction, limestone gravel mixed into topsoil, and impaired drainage. She designed a restoration plan requiring controlled gravel removal, replacement of contaminated soil, rebuilt irrigation, and 2 growing cycles of monitoring. 3 contractors priced the work. My documented losses were no longer an emotional estimate. They included canceled produce contracts, destroyed materials, temporary watering costs, surveying, soil testing, and restoration. Rachel rejected items we could not support. The number that remained was smaller than my anger and far more useful. The association's insurer reserved its coverage position after reviewing the attorney's warning. That did not mean coverage was denied, but it meant the board could not assume someone else would pay. Thomas and 2 directors urged mediation. Diane rejected the first proposal because it required a recorded acknowledgement that the garden had never been part of the lease. The board voted to remove her authority to communicate with contractors, though she remained president through trial. When June told me about the vote, I felt no satisfaction. Diane's influence was shrinking, but every meeting and invoice still took place over ground I could not plant. On the evening before trial, Rachel arranged 3 documents across her conference table: authenticated Exhibit B, the uncertified P17A overlay, and Eli's survey. The same swale curved through all three. Only one document pushed the parking area across it. Rachel tapped the lease map. "Tomorrow, we do not need to prove what Diane was thinking," she said. "We prove what rights the HOA had, what it was warned about, and what it did anyway." The bench trial began on a Monday morning 6 months after the bulldozer crossed the swale. I sat beside Rachel with a yellow legal pad I never used. Across the aisle, Diane wore the same red jacket she had worn when she ordered the crew toward my peach trees. This time, there were no contractors waiting for her instructions. Susan Bell testified first. She described the title company's record retention system, the sealed carton, and the log she created when opening my paper file. She identified the original 1998 lease and Exhibit B, then connected their dates and reference numbers to the recorded memorandum. The HOA's attorney questioned why the exhibit had never appeared in the county's digital image. Susan explained that the memorandum, not the full lease, had been recorded, while the executed lease remained in the closing archive. Its absence from the online scan did not change the document's origin. Eli Navarro followed. Using a large survey mounted on foam board, he traced my deed calls from the northern iron pin to the southern monument. He explained how the drainage swale corresponded with the physical features shown on Exhibit B. The former leased area measured 0.29 acres east of that line. The new gravel occupied another 0.32 acres west of it. The HOA argued that streams and swales could move. Eli agreed, then explained that he had not treated the watercourse as the controlling monument. The iron pins, bearings, distances, deed description, and lease map supported the same line. The swale was corroboration, not the legal foundation. That answer mattered because it showed the difference between evidence and a shortcut. No one document was being asked to perform work it could not do. Marcus Hale identified the work order, Diane's authorization letter, and the email attaching P17A. He acknowledged that his crew resumed work after I objected. Then he explained that Diane had represented the orange flags as association limits and accepted responsibility in writing. If he had received Exhibit B or Eli's survey, he said, the equipment would have stopped at the existing gravel strip. The HOA's historical use argument came next. Its maintenance vendor produced invoices dating back 15 years. Rachel placed each location on Eli's survey. Every resurfacing entry referred to 18 spaces, the clubhouse drive, or the eastern gravel strip. None mentioned the garden, peach trees, raised beds, or land west of the swale. June Patel's old photographs showed Bell family vegetables growing there while residents parked on the other side. Diane testified that she believed the entire strip had always served the clubhouse. She said the board's concept graphic merely illustrated that understanding. Rachel showed her the former attorney's warning, followed by the email in which she asked the property manager to remove the words "concept only," not a boundary survey. "Why remove that warning before sending the drawing to a contractor?" Rachel asked. Diane said the label looked unprofessional and might confuse the crew. She insisted she thought P17A represented the association's established rights. Rachel then displayed photographs of my garden from every year between 2018 and the bulldozing. The same beds and peach trees occupied the disputed area. Diane had attended 2 pantry fundraisers there. She admitted she had never seen vehicles parked west of the swale before the project. The judge asked the HOA's attorney to identify the source of any current right over my garden. He offered 3 alternatives: renewal by conduct, an implied continuation of the original arrangement, and historical use sufficient to justify further factual review. The judge noted that the case had already passed through discovery and trial. She asked for a document signed after September 2023, evidence of parking within the garden parcel, or proof that I had accepted rent for expanded use. The HOA had none. Dr. Lena Cho testified last on damages. She explained that removing visible gravel would not be enough. Machinery had forced limestone fragments into the growing layer and compressed the soil beneath it. Her plan required staged excavation, replacement topsoil, drainage repair, rebuilt irrigation, and monitoring through 2 planting cycles. She tied each task to photographs, core samples, and 3 contractor bids. The ruling came 2 weeks later. The court declared that I owned the disputed 0.32 acres, that the 1998 lease had expired, and that even while active, it excluded the garden. The HOA had no easement or continuing parking right west of the surveyed line. Its entry, bulldozing, and gravel placement constituted civil trespass. A permanent injunction prohibited the association, its contractors, and future boards from entering or altering the parcel without my written permission. The judge reserved the precise damages calculation for a later phase and directed the parties to a settlement conference. That was not hesitation about the boundary. It was a chance to build a restoration order that could be supervised and enforced without another trial over every invoice. With liability decided, the HOA's position changed. Thomas Reed and two directors attended the conference instead of leaving negotiations entirely to Diane. The association did not admit intentional fraud, and I did not demand language the evidence could not prove. We focused on the land, the losses, and preventing repetition. The final agreement required the HOA to remove all gravel and geotextile under Dr. Cho's supervision, replace contaminated soil, rebuild 14 cedar beds, restore drainage, and install a new irrigation manifold. Work had to remain east of Eli's marked access route and be completed before the next spring planting window. The HOA also agreed to pay $72,400. Of that amount, $41,600 covered gravel removal and soil restoration. $11,800 covered beds and irrigation. $7,500 covered documented produce losses. $6,500 covered surveying and soil analysis, and $5,000 contributed toward mediation and legal costs. The figures came from records, not punishment. A boundary acknowledgement incorporating Eli's survey would be recorded with the property records. The permanent injunction and restoration obligations were incorporated into the final judgment, giving the court authority to enforce them. Diane signed for the HOA only after the board authorized the agreement without giving her discretion to change it. She did not look at me. I did not need her apology to know where the line was anymore. 3 weeks later, an excavator rolled beside my garden. For one sharp second, the sight of its bucket brought back the morning of the bulldozer. Then Eli checked the capped stakes. Dr. Cho pointed toward the first strip of gravel, and the machine began lifting the parking lot away from my soil. The bucket teeth disappeared beneath the gray surface, and the first sheet of black geotextile rose into daylight. Under it, a narrow band of dark soil remained, damaged but unmistakably mine at last. Removing the parking lot took 9 days. Dr. Cho inspected each section before the crew replaced soil, and Eli checked the boundary stakes every morning. The workers used smaller equipment near the peach trees. No bucket crossed the line established by the iron pins. What emerged beneath the gravel was not the garden I had lost. The soil was pale, packed, and scattered with broken irrigation fittings. Restoration was slower than destruction. The crew loosened the compacted layer, removed contaminated material, rebuilt the drainage edge, and blended replacement topsoil according to Dr. Cho's plan. New cedar boards arrived in bundles. 14 beds returned one frame at a time. I kept one bent metal corner from an original bed. It carried a scrape left by the bulldozer blade. I stored it in the garden shed, not as a trophy, but because repair can make damage look cleaner than it felt. The new irrigation manifold went in before winter. In early spring, soil tests showed enough improvement to begin planting, although Dr. Cho limited the first crop and required another season of monitoring. My peach trees survived. Their blossoms were thinner than usual, but when the first pink petals opened, I stood beneath them longer than I intended. June Patel arrived that weekend with 6 residents from Stonebridge Commons. They brought gloves, seedlings, and folding chairs. Even the neighbor who had once driven past without speaking came carrying 2 bags of compost. They measured rows, filled beds, and argued mildly over where the basil should go. By sunset, green labels marked the dark soil where painted parking lines had once been planned. The HOA recorded the boundary acknowledgement with Eli's survey attached. Its new construction policy required a title review and certified site plan before any project near an exterior property line. The board also released the former attorney's warning and project history to the membership. Diane resigned as president the following week. Her letter blamed division within the community and did not mention my garden. Her resignation did not rebuild anything, but it ended her ability to treat certainty as proof. The first restored harvest was modest: herbs, beans, cucumbers, and enough tomatoes to resume one restaurant delivery. I saved the best crates for the food pantry. When I carried them inside, the coordinator looked at the labels and hugged me. Later that afternoon, I filed the certified lease map, judgment, restoration reports, and recorded survey together in a fireproof box. P17A went into the same folder. I wanted the false map preserved beside the documents that corrected it. The number in its corner had once appeared on a work order as if it settled everything. Instead, it led us backward, to the archived lease, the excluded garden parcel, the iron pins, and the warning Diane had ignored. That evening I watered the new tomato rows by hand. The drainage swale carried the excess east, just as it always had. Beyond it, cars remained inside the original 18 spaces. On my side, the peach trees cast long shadows over the rebuilt beds. The map did not save the garden by itself. People preserved it, authenticated it, measured it, and made the HOA answer for crossing its limits. But without that folded page, the truth would have taken much longer to uncover. I pressed one stake beside the first tomato plant and stepped back. This time, every marker on the ground matched the line in the record.